All right, thank you everyone for tuning in today. This is the Across the Campus podcast. I'm your host, Alex. Alongside me today is AJ. AJ, say hey to everybody.
Hey everybody, how we doing? My name is AJ. Of course, we got Alex over in Ohio. I'm in Indiana, but we're making this thing work.
Hey, we're going to make it work as best we can. Cover Midwest football, cover
Absolutely.
the United States, and tell everybody
Or
they're right and they're wrong.
Our favorite, the Mac.
The Mac. Good old Maction going on tonight.
Did you watch that last night by chance?
I did not. I saw the cartwheel, though. That was incredible. I was dying.
It was impressive, to say the least. That was an O lineman, too.
Yeah, no, it was so beautiful. And then the play still worked. Like,
It
still
did,
got
yeah.
it first down. I was like, this is amazing.
It did.
And
And, for Akron, obviously, they played Eastern Michigan and dropped that one 42-14. But I don't know if you saw any of the because Akron's 0-10 right now. So
Right.
I don't know if you saw the stands there, but there was like maybe 5 people in the stands. And
Five. I thought that was just grounds crew.
Exactly. But of these 5 people had paper bags over their heads.
Jesus.
Like-
The Factory of Sadness has moved its way down to Akron, Ohio.
That it has. But I just kind of pulled up their stats here. They ran for 54. Or this is Akron. They ran for 54 yards and threw for 288.
That's stupid.
Yeah, and Eastern ran for 252 and threw for 246.
Eastern had, 5 rushing touchdowns last night? Is that what I remember seeing?
6.
6, okay, yeah. So Eastern had a coming out party.
Yeah.
A little bit late, I think they forgot that the season is almost over, but
Right.
it's Eastern.
It is on that gray field of theirs.
They call that, I think they call that stadium the Factory now. That's like the nickname.
Yeah, something like that. There was a kid from my high school who he transferred there. He played at Michigan for 2 years and then transferred to Eastern.
Okay.
And but yeah, he was telling me about it. He goes, it wasn't a fun thing to play on, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, it's and you feel bad for those kids who goes to Eastern, right? Because they're right down the road from Michigan,
Right.
Literally 6 miles, and
Then
Michigan
you
is
have-
just here we are.
Yeah, exactly. Then you have Central and Western, who are always fairly pretty. They're usually pretty good in the MAC. Because Central does come down to Muncie this week, my alma mater. So it's kind of weird that being on a Saturday, but we'll take it. I think it's a 2:00 kickoff, something like that.
That's for the MAC. I think that's so wild that they're doing that just because of the popularity of midweek Maction.
Right.
That's been their staple for the last 10 years now. Just midweek Maction is what
At
they call
least,
it.
yeah. That's the only MAC game on Saturday is Ball State Central Michigan.
That's insane.
Yeah, Central's 4-2, Ball State's 4-5. This is the best year the Cardinals have had in a couple of years. Because when I was there in 2013, that's when Northern Illinois was running the conference. They had Jordan Lynch at quarterback, and so Brady Hoke, being a Ball State alum, and he was coach of Michigan at the time, and so he paid for 200 Ball State students to take a road trip from Muncie up to DeKalb. And so we took that trip up there, about 200 of us, and we just had a blast. That was actually a year ago today. That came up in my time hop. And talk about a MAC facility to the nines. It's absolutely beautiful what
they've
they
got all
have.
that Chicago money. I mean, a lot of those kids who go there, I don't want to say they come from, quote unquote rich families, but there's a lot of money in that area.
Of course.
And, Northern Illinois for being that premier team for as long as they were, making it to the Orange Bowl where they played Florida State. That was so critical. One, for the conference to make us look more legitimate.
Of course.
But 2, they got all that money from that bowl game.
Yep.
Time to upgrade some facilities. Let's make this place rock.
Because I believe that was in 2012 when they were down there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because that money came in 13 when we went there. But that's when, of course, Rod Carey, he was there for a long time.
I'm kind of
And-
glad to see him out of there. Being a Toledo guy, that was always our Achilles heel.
Sure.
We're so close. We keep getting ranked. Oh, and then here comes Northern Illinois. My favorite game was the barn burner. It was double overtime. It was 76-70.
I remember that, yeah.
That was nuts. And
Yeah.
then they followed it up a week later with a game against Western where it was 63-60. It was so stupid.
Yeah. I think Rod Carey, he's at Temple now, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about Northern Illinois there. Ball State Ball State went up there this year and beat them 27-20.
Yes, they did.
And then, of course, we laid the smack down on Toledo 52-14.
A game that I don't want to talk about because it was right on the heels of us losing to Bowling Green. We just
That's
lost
right.
our starting quarterback, Mitch Gadani.
That's right.
Who I'm a fan of guys who can kind of run that dual threat quarterback thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Godani he's a senior. You know, he's smart with what he does, but he's just so injury prone. Like it happened
Sure.
against Kentucky at the beginning of the year. Toledo, for those who do remember, was winning that game.
Mm-hmm.
And then going into the fourth quarter, they were down by 3.
Right.
And Godani got hurt at the end of the third, and that was all she wrote. Like,
Right.
He's so injury prone, and they just got to figure out what they're doing. But,
Sure. That Ball State game, Toledo gave up 374 yards rushing.
which is the most that they've given up, I want to say, in like 3 years.
Probably.
To a MAC opponent.
Because they've been stout. I mean, when they had Campbell, I mean, they were stout.
Mm-hmm.
And now what he's doing at Iowa State right now is incredible too. He'll be a candidate for some high profile jobs in the next probably 2 years or so.
Well, I mean, you know, there's rumors that, and you know, rumors are what they are.
Right.
There's rumors that, you know, he could leap and take a shot at the NFL. Like I hope the Browns, if they look to college ranks, I hope that they don't take Matt Campbell, because that guy has such a promising career. I don't want to see that destroyed by 1 year because he didn't succeed with the Browns. I don't want to see that canceled out, you know.
Of course.
I think, you know, he'd be much more suited for like a Michigan job, you know, something like that, where he another quote unquote stepping stone, but like a look, mom, I made it kind of job, you know.
Of course. I think that job, and then I think Notre Dame will probably be up in the next 2 years. I mean,
Brian
Florida
Kelly
State
will
will
be
be
gone?
open at this year. That's the same reason why Minnesota gave PJ Fleck that 7-year extension, because they knew these teams were going to come after him, and they probably still will. But what he has going on at Minnesota right now is just incredible. His I don't know. Did you see him crowd surfing the other day?
Did I see what?
Did you see him crowd surf the other day in the locker room?
That was incredible. Well, and so I'm sitting there watching that game, right? I was at work the other day, and I flipped back and forth between the different games, and I was watching the end of that game. I didn't realize just how badly Minnesota was dominating Penn State. You know, they let them crawl back into it towards the end, but like Minnesota had a double-digit lead for probably 9/10 of that game, and you just look at how out of sorts, you know, James Franklin had that squad. They weren't ready. Minnesota created a very hostile environment, and
Of course.
I mean, I was just super excited for him. One, because he's a former MAC coach, doing it right in the Big Ten. But two, I mean, his energy is so contagious. Love him or hate him, you can't really say he's not doing his job the right way. He's motivated to get these kids, hey, look, you can compete with anybody. But then he's also going out and showing, I don't care what anybody thinks about me, because what I want to do is I want to turn this program around and get wins.
Absolutely. And, you know, Pat McAfee, the great Pat McAfee, had a quote the other day about it. He goes, you can't beat a team that's all in. And he has these Minnesota Golden Gophers all in. You know, you talked about being a double-digit lead. It was 24-13 going into halftime.
Yeah.
And then Minnesota obviously ended up winning 31-26. But looking at numbers, you know, I'm a big stats guy. I love the numbers here. You know, Penn State threw for 340 yards, rushed for 178, and Minnesota threw for 339 and rushed for 121.
Yeah.
So I mean, relatively wasn't, you know, crazy lopsided, you know, by any means.
Sure.
But still, I mean, like you said, the final score was 31-26, so they obviously made a run, just like Michigan did against Penn State 2-3 weeks ago.
Well, and that's one thing I've noticed with Penn State is you watch them this year. Penn State's either a first half team or a second half team.
Right.
And unfortunately, you let Minnesota have that big of a lead, you know, an 11-point lead at halftime. I don't care if you're a second half team, like you didn't cut that deficit enough because you kept leaking against that team. Like, you know, Minnesota did just enough. Sure, they only scored one more touchdown, but you know, when you spot a team an 11-point, you know, lead, it's hard
At
to
home.
come back from that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that crowd was crazy. I've never seen, well, I can't say I've never seen, but I've never seen Minnesota get that excited.
Sure.
There was a lot on the line. I think it'll be interesting the next couple weeks. Minnesota's got, you know, they've got Iowa this week, and then they've got Wisconsin at the end of the season, and then potentially Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship.
Of course,
game,
yeah.
Which is going to be wild.
Absolutely. Now, I'll be down there for that. I mean, it's only a 2-hour drive for me, so I'll for sure be down there for that. You know, we're talking about Penn State still. IU travels to Penn State this week, and IU's a team who you wrote about. Was it today?
Yesterday, yeah.
Yesterday, yeah. And, you know, being here in Indiana, I've had friends who played at IU, tons of friends who go to IU, and this is the most excitement they've had since, you know, gosh, probably Hep was there. You know,
Well, I was going to say, I mean, this is their first winning season since 2007, their first time being ranked since 1994.
Did you see that stat on Big Ten Network yesterday?
Which one?
See if I can find it here. I sent it to my buddy. It was what was going on in '94 at the time, the last time they were ranked.
Friends hadn't even aired yet.
Yeah, Friends aired 2 days later. The number one movie was Time Cop. The number one song was "I'll Make Love to You" by Boyz II Men. Tom Allen was a high school football coach in Florida, and gas cost $1.13 a gallon.
Just insane.
Yeah.
Well, and here's what's crazy right now is I'm looking at the Big Ten standings currently. Right now, Michigan and Indiana share the same record.
Yeah, and they still play each other.
Yeah, and I mean, like I don't want to say that Indiana can't compete and that they won't beat Penn State or Michigan. I think that if you're fully in on a program and that what your coach is trying to do, you can beat anybody. Kind of what you were just saying, what Pat McAfee was saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I just think that the brand of football Michigan is playing now compared to when they played Wisconsin is vastly superior. I think Penn State's going to be angry coming off that loss, knowing that they still have some kind of an outside shot at things. Things have to fall the right way for them.
Sure.
But, I mean, Penn State's going to be livid. And I think Indiana can finish with 9 wins. Looking at the rest of their record, they've got, they got Penn State, they've got Michigan the following week, but then they're at Purdue for the Oaken Bucket, right?
Right.
And that's a huge rivalry game. I mean, everybody in Indiana knows that game.
And I'm pretty sure Purdue at this point is going to the local high school to get a quarterback.
I mean, they might as well. It wouldn't be any worse than what they're currently doing.
No.
I think the biggest thing that hurt Indiana and was the loss of Penix.
Yep.
Michael Penix. He did have that surgery, which I'm really glad to see that he got through that okay. But that was so critical to what Indiana had been doing all year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he really had gotten that offense moving after the loss to Ohio State. They were able to move the ball. They obviously shut out Rutgers, but who hasn't? 35-14. Right. But really, I mean, they've only lost to who? Ohio State and
Michigan State, and that Michigan State loss was a lot closer than that score indicated.
Yeah,
it was 40-31. But I mean,
it was that fumble for a touchdown, right at the end.
That was the clinch, and
yeah,
and you feel for them. I mean, we could very realistically be looking at an 8-1 team who's probably 20th in the country right now.
Absolutely.
And it's cool to see now if they can upset Penn State. I mean, chaos.
Sure.
It just would be insane.
Yeah, I have, like I said, a lot of friends who've gone to IU, who played for IU, who are season ticket holders for IU, and most of the time when I go down there to games, people leave at halftime.
Yeah.
They just do. It's, especially in this year, too, I was kind of surprised. They always play Ohio State tough. And this year, they just came out flat.
Well, and that's my whole thing, right? It's you go into that Ohio State game. I mean, sure, Ohio State dropped 51 on you, and like that, for any team, that's demoralizing. And I kind of touched on this in my article this week, like how the coach, he literally stood up there. Tom Allen was like, "Hey, listen, we've got to not let them beat us twice. We have to flush this away." And they did. I mean, they responded really well against UConn, blowing them out 38-3. But I think you're seeing that culture difference. Any other Indiana team would have just been like, all right, well, that's the season.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think that, and I mentioned this yesterday, he's not the flashy hire. Like, I didn't even know who this guy was.
Yeah, he's a local legend in Indianapolis. He coached at Ben Davis High School, and his dad was a coach there as well. So he's really well known around that part of the state.
And that's my whole thing, right? It's like you can't. I mean, the guy has the right mindset for the job, and I think for a school like Indiana, he's the perfect coach. He's not going to go and win you like a national championship, but he's also not going to lead you down, like, to where you're getting blown out every single week. And I mean, now they're sitting on a 7-2 record, looking at potentially winning 9 games this year, which is unheard of.
I believe they're 25th in the AP poll.
Yeah, they ranked 25th for the first, like we talked about, first time since '94. Not ranked in the college football poll, but I mean the AP poll. That's a good recruiting tool. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day. You've now say, look, we cracked the top 25 for the first time in 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter who we played to get there. We did it. We won enough games to get there, right?
Of course.
It's not I mean, and then they're 4-2 in conference play. You know, losses to Ohio State and Michigan State, and Michigan State is now sitting below them. So like, you can throw that one away. Ohio State's probably going to win the national championship. It's going to be them or LSU. Buckeye fans, if you're listening, I'm not trying to jinx you. I truly believe you guys have the best team in the country, specifically on defense with Chase Young. He's coming back off of that suspension, which was something we can definitely talk about.
We could do that. We can do a whole podcast on that.
Oh, 100%. And even though I'm not an Ohio State fan, I'm really glad to see that he's getting the opportunity to play, because I think the thing is stupid. Yes, you know the rules, you know what you're supposed to do or not do. The thing was stupid. Like, and to get brought up, 2 years after the fact? Like, come on. Somebody was mad that Ohio State was ranked 1 in the college football poll. That's
exactly.
What that was.
If Ohio State's number 2, that doesn't show up.
Right.
Because I went down to Columbus this past weekend for the game against Maryland, and the first 10 seconds were great. Then after that, it was just a complete blowout.
Right.
But 73-14, and those 14 points were just gimme points because they're playing against the third and fourth string guys.
Right.
But yeah, that was kind of the whole talk around campus that day, and the local establishments. We went down there talking about it and whatnot. It was showing up on all the TVs, and that was when they were reporting the 4 games. But everybody mentioned 4 games, yes, but it'll be taken down to 2, which it was,
right.
And that helps too. That kind of shows to Chase Young's character in the sense that he was cooperative with all the questions they asked. He never didn't lie about anything. He was straightforward, and I think that's what really helped him, get these 2 games. And if you think about it. It's Maryland and then Rutgers. He's not missing out. He wasn't going to play the second half of either game anyway, because they pulled all the starters at halftime.
As they should,
Yeah, I think Justin Fields came out in his jersey and a coat to stay warm. The same thing with Dobbins and all those guys. And so the same thing will happen up in Piscataway this weekend against Rutgers. Those guys won't come out the second half. So it's really just we can look at it in the sense that it was a 3-week bye really for him, because they had the bye week and then into Maryland. And so, 3-week bye to stay healthy for really the harder part of the season with Penn State, Michigan, potentially the Big Ten championship, and then beyond that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we could talk all day about the Chase Young thing, like you said. I really like the kid. I think he's a smart football player. I think he's aggressive. I think, whatever team in the NFL gets him, once they tweak him the way they want to, he's going to be a machine, just like both of the Bosa brothers. I mean, those guys are tearing it up. Like, it's so cool to watch him play. And, like, even as a guy who cheers for Michigan, I'm a big Michigan fan. Was at the Notre Dame game here a couple weeks ago, which was phenomenal. Didn't care. I was soaked to the core. But I think as a college football fan, first and foremost, admiring talent across the table. It's not It's not one of those things where I'm like, oh well, no, everybody on Ohio State sucks. It's like I can recognize when a guy like J.K. Dobbins is a special talent on the field. I can recognize a Chase Young, right? And these are guys everybody in the country knows. But you have to dig a little bit deeper. I mean, you really have to look at what they're doing, and the fact that Ohio State could conceivably have 3 Heisman quote unquote contenders right now, and I think Fields is probably the leader on that. But the fact that there are 3 Heisman level players on that team, it's unfathomable. Like, you don't hear of that, and it's really cool to see what they're doing down there in Columbus. It's got me excited for the playoffs, for the fact that, hey, maybe the Big Ten will win another championship.
Absolutely, and it goes to show too, Ryan Day being his first year. It's weird because obviously we're coming off the 7 years of Urban Meyer, who's a Hall of Fame coach, but you just notice differences in the staff and in the team. There was no drama up until this point. And I wouldn't even really consider this too much drama compared to what it could have been.
I would call it a hangover from the Meyer era, honestly.
Exactly, something happened, but there hasn't been anything under Ryan Day. And he spoke at the Skull session right before the game on Saturday, and his message was very clear. I mean, the team's very disciplined. He demands discipline out of his guys. He demands perfection, and he gets it. Yeah. And I think it's too when the staff changes, because he obviously get rid of Schiano and brought in 2 coaches from Michigan, and so they've changed that defense and just more disciplined, sound, fundamental football. And Larry Johnson, who's arguably the best defensive line coach in the country, if you look at the guys who's put in the NFL over the past 5 years, the Bosa brothers, Sam Hubbard, who's he's very good but plays for Cincinnati, so he doesn't get the credit, down there. And so, really, the guys he's been pumping into the NFL, he's phenomenal, and who knows how long he'll be around. He'll probably get a head coaching job somewhere. It's just bound to happen.
Right.
But it was so funny, though, here. Chase Young just tweeted out, except this is today at about noon, 12:30. He was excited to be back on the field next week. Thank you, Buckeye Nation, for all the love and support. I'm blessed to be part of this team, this university, and this community. Lots of love to my family. God bless and go Buckeyes. Mm-hmm. Matt Leinart just retweeted it and goes, I feel bad for Penn State offensive linemen.
Yeah, that's why I think Penn State has to win every other game they can because they're not beating Ohio State. That's
no.
Sorry Penn State, you guys looked really good this year. You're not beating Ohio State. That'll be my guarantee. There's no chance that Penn State, especially not with him coming back, he's going to be coming back fired up. And I think that game's at Penn State. No,
it's at Ohio
State. Yeah. So
if that was at Penn State, I'd be a little more nervous because it would still be a noon game though, and that's one thing I don't understand. Also, Rutgers this week is at 3:30, but we turn around and go from a noon to a noon. Against Penn State, then Michigan's always at noon.
Right.
But I mean, Penn State, this should be a prime time, college game day. I guess it probably won't be game day though anymore because they lost. That's the reason why they didn't come to Columbus for Wisconsin.
They're still a top 10 team though.
They are.
If they take care of Indiana this week, they may stay at 9, might move up to 10 depending on what happens above them. So then you've got number 2 versus number 8 or 9. Like that's still a top 10 matchup. I think there's a possibility. I think that if Michigan wins out, they don't want to have Ohio State in almost back-to-back. No, it would be back-to-back games. So
yeah,
game
day wouldn't be there for that because it's Fox's big noon kickoff team.
That's right.
That game's on Fox now, so it'll be the big noon team or whoever it is. Brady Quinn, Reggie Bush, Leinart, Urban, yeah. Because they were at the Wisconsin game this year.
Yeah, that's right. Let's switch gears here. Let's talk about the SEC.
Do it.
The cluster of ridiculousness that is the SEC.
Absolutely.
LSU thoroughly dominated Alabama, and everybody wants to talk about, it was only a 5-point loss. There was a 5-point loss at home. Since 2015, Alabama is 39-1 in conference games, 31-0 at home until this last weekend.
Absolutely.
Since 2015.
Here, I pulled up some stats here for LSU had a total offense of 559. Alabama had 541. Passing wise, the Crimson Tide led there at 418, LSU at 393. Rushing was fairly close, 166 for the Tigers, and the Tide 123. But I was able to watch the second half of that game after we got back to my cousins from the game, and Joey Burrow is the real deal.
Yeah.
I don't watch a whole lot of SEC games. I don't like, for some reason, CBS football commentators aren't my favorite. For some reason, so I don't really pay attention.
Fair.
But I was able to watch Joey Burrow. He is a Buckeye, so I do watch him.
Yeah,
and it's incredible that he was a third-string quarterback at Ohio State behind J.T. Barrett and Haskins.
Yeah, and you look at the talent, and he's been the Heisman favorite since the beginning of the season, so I'm not saying anything that surprises anybody. But he's showing his mettle just by, he had no turnovers. He had 393 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. He had 8 incompletions. 8. Tua went 21 of 40 for 418 yards, 4 touchdowns. The stat that sticks out to me, there are 2 stats that stick out to me. LSU only had 1 turnover. Bama had 2.
Right.
And Bama is not a team that likes to turn it over. Like, they're very good at protecting the ball, right? The other stat that really kind of got me is LSU had the ball 10 minutes longer than Alabama did. I'm sorry, if a team dominates you in time of possession alone, you're probably not winning that game.
No, not at all.
Like, it's just unspeakable.
It is. Here on the year, Joey Burrow, passing-wise, he has 3,198 total yards, 33 touchdowns, 4 picks, and a QBR of 92.6, which is 4th in the country. And in the by conference here, let's see here. If I can find this here.
His completion percentage versus the conference is 78%.
Yeah, 70, yeah, I was just pulling that up there. Yeah, 78% with 17 touchdowns and 1,732 yards.
Only one pick.
Only one. That's incredible.
Like the kid knows what he's doing, and he's a senior, yeah, so he's graduating this year.
Hmm.
It's I'm looking at his stuff right now. He's from here in Ohio, so it's not even like Ohio State recruited him from like California. No, he's homegrown in Ohio. Like
Yeah, he's an Athens kid. His dad was a coach at OU for years,
Yes,
I
he
believe.
was. That's so just Ohio. Everybody wants to talk about, oh, well, the Big Ten's weak. This, that, and the other. Ohio is like where you get all of your players. So like, calm down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
And
Ohio,
the
Texas.
Toledo area, the Cleveland, the St. Ignatiuses, the St. Ed's of Cleveland, Toledo. Like my buddy Chris Wormley came out of Toledo Whitmer High School, and he's of course went to Michigan, and he's a third round pick for the Ravens now, defensive lineman. But yeah, there's Fremont even. Woodson came out of Woodson came out of
Woodson,
Fremont,
yep.
and so they a lot of big time names.
So how ridiculous is it that Alabama is still fifth in the country?
It's not surprising for the simple fact that the committee needs Alabama.
Do they need them or do they want them?
It's hard to tell because they've never had a year without him.
And that's my whole thing, is right. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, I talked about this in the article I put out today, actually, about how I feel like Oregon is being punished for losing to Auburn at the beginning of the season. Auburn, who currently ranks 12th in the college football playoff. Oregon is still being punished for that one loss, while Georgia is being rewarded for a loss against an SEC opponent
Yeah,
3 weeks ago.
right.
There's a huge gap there.
It is. And one thing, too, I think about Oregon, the two things they have against them is, one, Pac-12. The Pac-12 never gets any respect.
Right.
And two, being here on the East Coast, nobody watches Oregon.
Right.
They play that 10 o'clock game on Saturday night. They play the game that you have on TV when you're going to bed. Nobody pays attention to them. So those are two things. And this Herbert kid, I mean, I obviously don't know a whole lot about him, but he was last year supposed to be a top pick in the draft, and now his name's not even in the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks.
Well, and that's. I mean, you look at his season. He's got 2,300 passing yards, 24 touchdowns. He's only got 2 picks, but nobody's talking about him because of Tua, because of now Justin Fields, who, I mean, we all knew Justin Fields was going to be special, right? But I don't think anybody really truly thought he was going to be this special.
Right.
You've got Joe Burrow, obviously. You got Bo Nix from Auburn. And then, I mean,
He's only a freshman.
yeah, like, all these other people are being talked about. And Justin Herbert is just quietly piloting this team. His numbers aren't bad. Like,
No.
And sure, Oregon's 8-1 right now, but his numbers aren't bad. Like, you look at his career. Last year he had 29 touchdowns, 8 picks. But this year he's cut down on those picks. He's got more completion. His completion percentage is up by 10%. So he's at 70% on the year. And it's just, I don't want to say it's against weaker competition, because, I mean, it is, let's be honest. Like you said, the Pac-12 doesn't get any respect. But he has more wins against top 25 teams than Alabama does this year.
He does, yeah.
Sure, it's Washington,
Right.
but it counts.
And, even you look at it too, Stanford, they've gone downhill. Like, over the past, I'd say 3-4 years.
Yeah.
It's been unheard of, and they ran college football for years. I mean, it's the same coach still. It's and so it's, I don't know what's going on there. But then again, the only time I ever watched Stanford is when they're here on the East Coast playing Notre Dame, because that's what's on TV out here.
Right.
So,
And that's,
but go back here a little quick. The Buckeyes did beat Villanova actually, 76-51.
wow, that's a huge win, because Villanova was 10, right?
10, yeah.
That's a huge win for the Buckeyes. Huge win for the Big Ten. Is that the ACC Big Ten Challenge? Is that what's going on?
No, that's in a couple weeks. I think the Buckeyes, we play North Carolina in that, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, that's here in a few weeks. That's not until December, I think, actually. Yeah, North Carolina, that's December 4th.
Quick thing of note, since we're talking football, Maction right now, Northern Illinois is up 14-7 on Toledo. Eli Peters for Toledo. He's a freshman, and this is something I want to kind of talk about real quick. Is we lost Mitchell Godani, and we've had to turn to this freshman. This guy is not even a redshirt. He's a true freshman, 18, 19-year-old kid, and the fact that he's been able to somehow steer us into the discussion for making the MAC championship. This kid's something special. I mean, right now he's 11 of 16 for 104 yards and a passing touchdown right now tonight. But, that's a lot of pressure on a freshman. Like,
sure. He was just playing high school ball last year this time.
Yeah, like he was I don't even know. He's from Jacksonville, Florida, so he may have been taking him to like a state championship or a state finals, whatever. But like the level of competition is so much different.
Sure.
And I mean everybody knows that. Same with college to NFL, and so like the fact that this kid is looking at college level defenses. I don't care where you play. College level is college level, and he's somehow managing to guide Toledo through this ridiculous schedule that is the MAC, because the MAC is anything but predictable.
Of course.
So, I mean, hats off to him. I don't think Toledo wins the MAC this year. I really don't. I think right now Ball State, for me, they've looked pretty good. I mean, overall right now, I don't know what happened after that Toledo game. They've just kind of fallen flat a little bit.
Yeah, last week they had played Western last week, and just a couple turnovers really was what did it. I'm pulling up the MAC standings right here. Ball State is sitting in third in the West. That 3-2. Or excuse me, 4-5, 3-2 in the conference. Western's sitting at 5-2 in the conference. That's in the West. On the East side, Miami of Ohio is 4-1. Buffalo 3-2. Ohio 3-3. Kent State 2-3. BG 2-3. Akron, obviously they're 0-6, 0-10 on the year.
Yeah, BG should really only be 1-4. I just
right.
Need to point that out.
Not salty about that at all.
No, not at all. Never. But Miami, Ohio, like they've come on strong. Sure, they lost to Ohio State at the beginning of the year. They lost to Iowa, and they lost to Cincinnati. But like after that, they've been playing some great football. I mean, they have one, loss in the MAC to Western. But I mean, they beat Northern Illinois. They beat Kent State last week. They beat Ohio, which was a huge upset. Everybody's like, Ohio was an early favorite to win the East Division, and Ohio is, they're out of the discussion. It's pretty wild to see. But again, it's the MAC. Anything is
right. If you take away that Ohio State game, really, games are fairly close. I mean, I guess Tennessee Tech too is 48-17, but we go down here, they beat Buffalo 34-20. Northern Illinois 27-24, Kent State 23-16, Ohio 24-21, and they're up right now on BG 17-3.
Yeah, and I get what BG's doing. That the culture down there, they're changing it. They got a new coach. They're trying to keep things alive down there, but it's just that kid Grant Loy, the quarterback. That dude is. I can't figure out what to think of him, because he looked really good in some games and then he looks awful in other games.
Right.
This year on the year he's got 5 passing touchdowns and 7 interceptions, with a QBR of 32.6, which is awful.
Right.
But then like you look at him rushing wise, kid's got 3 rushing touchdowns on the year. He's got 300 rushing yards. Like. I just don't understand, like, how this offense is not. I mean, he's a solid kid, but it's his interceptions that's costing them, and I don't understand how the offensive coordinator doesn't say, all right, look, we need to figure something out. You guys are 3-6 on the year. You're not going to win the MAC yet again. And it's just crazy to see.
And one thing too, we brought up Miami, Ohio a little bit ago, and I totally spaced this too. Their quarterback is a freshman, Brett Gabbert, who is Blaine Gabbert's brother.
Yes.
And so he looks just like him, really.
Yeah, they really do.
But I forgot all about that. He's 1,500 yards passing this year, 6 touchdowns, 5 picks, QBR of 43.5. But those are hard numbers to just talk about, having play the teams that they have played.
How many of those picks came against Ohio State? Just curious.
Let me pull that up here real quick.
Actually, I don't know about Ohio State, but 3 of them came against Western Michigan in the losing effort. So,
Probably, yeah.
so 2 of them.
Let's see
probably
here.
Ohio State. But fun fact.
He threw 1 pick against Ohio State.
Okay, so fun fact for
He was
those
he was
Ohio
5 of 15 for 48 yards, with a QBR of 18.3.
Okay. But yeah, for Ohio State fans, big fun fact. Or sorry, Miami fans rather. Miami is the only MAC team this year to lead Ohio State at any.
It was.
Or I think they're the only team to lead Ohio State. I think is the, and then
The
obviously they
safety.
got 76-5 was the final. So we don't talk about the rest of the game.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean, the Miami defensive line gave up.
yeah, they really did.
I just had that here. They gave up 5 sacks, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 5 sacks and 13 tackles for loss.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
Yeah, that's not the effort you want if you're trying to win a football game.
No, not at all.
Man, yeah, I don't know. I love this atmosphere. I mean, it's the best time of the year. I mean, right down conference races, everything matters. Every down, every point, everything. It's coming down to the finale. Games
It
of the
is,
week
yeah.
for me this week. You can never count it out. Michigan State. I don't know. Mark D'Antonio is a great coach. They're struggling this year. Jim Harbaugh's on the hot seat. I think getting that big win over Notre Dame was critical, but I just don't know. Michigan State seems to have Jim Harbaugh's number, especially at the Big House.
Yeah, I mean, Harbaugh struggled with top 10 wins because here early this year when Illinois beat Wisconsin, Harbaugh and Lovie Smith had the same amount of wins over top 10 teams.
Yeah.
And that's saying a lot. Talk about games of the week. For me, Georgia Auburn.
Ooh, yes.
Georgia was sitting at 8-1. Auburn sitting there at 7-2. They give Georgia 2.5 points here. But yeah, it is a pretty good slate actually this week. I think Texas Iowa State could be really good as well.
Oh man, I'm so heartbroken for Iowa State after that nail biter against
August,
Oklahoma. That was
tough.
nuts.
Yeah, that was tough. And then obviously Minnesota at Iowa. Iowa is a tough place. Kinnick Stadium is a tough place to play.
Oh, very tough.
And they're only giving Iowa 3 points there because it's at home.
Now this is a game that wasn't interesting early on this year, but suddenly gets interesting. Navy Notre Dame.
Yeah, Notre Dame Navy.
Navy's 7-1 right now, sitting at 23 in the country. Notre Dame 2 losses, Michigan and Georgia sitting at 16. They're only giving Notre Dame 7 points on that,
Yeah.
and it's in South Bend. That triple option offense that Navy likes to run, those service academies are so hard to plan for. And
They are, yeah.
and I think
And
they could really push Notre Dame around a little bit.
They do every year. Navy may not come out on top every year, but they do push them around. They give them a good game because, like you said, it's all service academies. From Army, Navy, Air Force. I saw Army. They came to Muncie when I think it was 2013. And I was able to watch the option offense for live, and it's impressive. Because then they can only do it too because they don't have the size of guys that some of these big schools have because military need to be a certain size, so they don't have the big offensive linemen as the Ohio States and Notre Dames of the world, and so that's how they get through.
Yeah, I really like it. I think that's a critical matchup. There'd be a huge win for Navy, obviously, and a devastating loss for Notre Dame. But I think even if Navy loses that game close. And I know there's no moral victories in college football, right? You can't, you're at that level. You can't, we only lost by 4.
Right.
But I think, Navy can really kind of hang their hat on, hey, this is a moral victory. Like, we were supposed to lose, and yeah, we lost, but we lost by, 3. We lost by a missed 2-point conversion. Like, whatever it is. Like, there are moral victories. If one thing goes right, that game changes.
Absolutely. And, this is one of those games, too, where if Notre Dame were to pull it out, Brian Kelly, you could probably say he's on the hot seat.
Which I think is so incredible. I mean, he's 7-2. He was just in the college football playoff, 2 years ago?
Yeah, and that was last year, wasn't it? Against Clemson. Yeah, it was last year.
Right,
They got beat by
last year.
Clemson.
So it's just, and the fact that he's on the hot seat, it just blows my mind. I think what are, for me looking at it, must-win games. Um, LSU, they can't have that hangover. It happens so many times in college football. That hang after the big victory, it's a hangover, and you come out and you look awful. They need to
Sure.
beat Ole Miss. One, Ole Miss looks absolutely terrible. They ranked, third to last in the conference. Matt Corral only has 4 passing touchdowns on the season.
Yikes.
Like, they are not good.
No.
So they really need to make sure that they come out swinging. Because if they come out flat and they lose this game, here Georgia, go ahead and go back to the playoff. Like,
Exactly. That's
you
what
open the
that's
door
what
for
will
so
happen
many other
too.
things.
You know, going through here, Baylor and Oklahoma. That's 10 versus 13. Oklahoma sitting there at 8-1, and Baylor at 9-0. They're giving Oklahoma 10 points there. It's at Baylor as well, and so that's a primetime game. That'll be a good one to watch. Um, let's see here, Arizona at Oregon. Of course, that's 10:30 at night, way past my bedtime. But
West Coast
the team
games.
the team that intrigues me every year, and I really can't figure them out, is UCLA. They're sitting right now at 4-5. They travel to number 7 Utah, who's sitting there at 8-1. And UCLA was supposed to be this team. They get Chip Kelly, and they're supposed to turn things around, and they really haven't. Because they've lost back-to-back years to Cincinnati, and and Cincinnati is no slouch like they used to be. Luke Fickell's done an incredible job there.
Yeah.
Has them sitting at 17 right now, but for some reason they just cannot figure it out, and they're giving Utah 21.5 points at home.
Well, and it blows my mind. So, right, yeah, you look at their season. They lost to San Diego State. They lost to Cincinnati. Again, Cincinnati, not a bad loss. They
At Cincinnati too.
yeah, so I'm not, I can't really fault them for that one, if you will. But then, then they beat number 19 Washington State 67-63, and then
Yep.
they drop the next 2, and it's just, you look at them and you're like, you clearly have the talent to compete in your conference, but then you go and get blown out by Oregon State. Like, who is
But then
sitting at 4 and 5.
they turn around and beat a ranked Arizona State.
Yeah, like it doesn't make sense to me.
No, it
to
doesn't.
beat them
And
by
I think
10, like, it was a huge win.
And I think people too realize the Chip Kelly offense. That was good for when it was with. That was before Mariota.
Oh,
Or was
yeah.
I can't think of what his name was, but yeah, it was good then. And now it's kind of like, everybody's figured it out. It's more RPO style than anything.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the nature of college football anymore. Is
Mm-hmm.
you get a lot of that RPO, that run pass option is so devastating, especially if you have a quarterback who really knows what he's doing.
And that's why Marcus Mariota is struggling in Tennessee.
Yeah, well, exactly. He looked great in college up at Oregon, but then that's why Ryan Tannehill took the job. I'm sure there's talk about there's an injury, whatever. But Tannehill's not a good quarterback. He ranks 30th
No.
in the NFL right now, but he can run an offense effectively, which is much more than Mariota. Mariota was good because he had his feet, and when you take his feet away from him, you force him to throw. Not a good quarterback.
No, and Tannehill was a receiver in college.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. I don't know. That UCLA team just they make you scratch your head. So
They do it because it's not like they slack in recruiting either. They get top recruits. It's never slacking there. But I guess that warm weather would attract me out there as well because we're looking at snow right now. So
Right, exactly. I'm looking outside and there's piles of snow, and those kids are out looking outside. I think I want to go surfing tonight.
exactly, what a rough life they live.
I lived that life. It was a fun one for the short period of time I was there.
Of course.
Like for me, the team that surprises me, and this is a little fun fact for those who love East Coast football. Appalachian State taking on Georgia State. Appalachian State ranks 25 in the country right now, sitting at 8-1, 4-1 in the Sun Belt, who is arguably the weakest conference in football, with the exception of maybe. Nope, no exceptions.
No.
The Sun Belt's the weakest, but Appalachian State's doing something right. They've knocked off South Carolina. They've knocked off North Carolina. They're the best team in the Carolinas right now. Like, Appalachian State out of the Sun Belt, which ties into, so you're telling me Georgia deserves to be ranked that high after the team they lost to a Sun Belt team.
Right.
Just saying.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Sun Belt rankings right here, and these schools, it's like, all right, Troy, Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Appalachian State there in the east.
Mm-hmm.
Then the Raging Cajuns down there in Louisiana, in the west, Arkansas State, Lafayette Monroe, Texas State,
Mm-hmm.
and South Alabama. Like, it's when you say weak, it's weak.
Yeah, it's so bad. And, like, I mean, Appalachian State, after that upset of Michigan back in '07, like, that's when they really started to make their push to be, all right, we want to be recognized as an FBS school and not an FCS school, which was fine.
Mm-hmm.
They made that push, that transition. It's worked out well for them. Sure, they're in a weak conference. I feel like they would fit better in, like a MAC or even an AAC.
Sure.
But I think that the transition in general has worked out well for them.
Yeah, because they did drop one a few weeks ago to Georgia Southern 24-21. Then they turned around and beat South Carolina 20-15, and that's what got them back in the top 25.
It was a huge win for them. Not only because of the caliber of South Carolina, but because of where that team comes from. Coming from the SEC, I always feel like the media gives you a bump if you beat an SEC opponent, and it doesn't matter who it is. They could be dead last in the SEC. You're going to get some kind of a bump because of it could be Vanderbilt, right? Like you could beat Vanderbilt, and you're going to get a plus 1 or 2 extra ranking. And I just don't think, again, I could rant about Georgia for hours and how I think that it's ridiculous where they're at. But I'm not a big SEC fan, but I don't think too many people outside of the SEC are. So we'll just leave it at
that. Exactly. Because I remember when the Buckeyes went to Alabama, or the Sugar Bowl, and beat Alabama in 15, went on to win the national championship.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Feinbaum, the SEC guy that he is, he had his show. He didn't talk about anything. He just let people call and vent. And it was so fun. I was actually working in Toledo at the time on Winterfest.
Okay.
And so it was just so fun listening to those people complain.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, as a Buckeye fan sitting back and listening to it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is all they have down there. And if you don't you don't like anybody outside of the SEC if you live in Alabama, Georgia, Florida, wherever you are.
Right. Well, and I think it was ridiculous. I'm sure you saw it as well. All the people on Twitter calling for Nick Saban to be fired. After
yeah.
It's like, listen, what's the phrase? Something about the rich don't know what they have until they lose it. And it's like, listen, you guys are still probably going to go to the playoffs, which is garbage, by the way. And there's a quote everybody throws around from a couple years ago, Nick Saban, well, if you don't win your conference, you shouldn't play for them. That's not what he said. I want to first off clarify that.
Right.
What he said was, well, we're the teams that played a 13th game, so we put in a little bit of extra effort to be here. And I think that that's the critical thing. It's not that you don't win your conference. It's we played that extra game to have the opportunity to play for this because we did so well in the conference.
Sure.
And I think that that's people mistake that quote all the time. I've done it myself. I did it years ago. But you really look at it and you're like, no, wait a minute. This is what he said. That being said, you can still hold that quote over him and say, look, you didn't even get to play for your conference championship, which means at best you're the third best team in your conference.
Right.
Sure.
I mean, that's what happened to Ohio State got in a couple years ago, and they didn't win the conference.
Yeah, and I
think Penn State did.
Yeah, and I think it's ridiculous. I would say this even if it was Michigan who did it. It doesn't matter. You don't deserve the right to play for national championship if you can't even win your conference.
Right.
Because it shows me that you're not even the best team in your conference, let alone the best team in the country.
Right, and I think at that point too, when that happened with Ohio State, the playoffs are still in its infancy. Second or third year, and the committee they still don't. But at that time, definitely didn't have their qualifications straight.
Right.
They were drawing for money at that point. I think.
Which is
it was which team is going to draw the most money, which team travels the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been to Ohio State games across the country, and they travel very well, better than most, if not any school in the country.
Well, and that's my idea. Is like I've talked about before, and I mean you and I can talk about this at some point. But I've talked about expanding to a 12-team playoff. Every conference champion gets an auto bid, and here's my thought on this, right? And people are like, "Oh no, auto bid, that's such an awful idea." Look, the NCAA basketball tournament does it, and if you didn't do an auto bid, you wouldn't have the stories like UMBC.
Hmm.
Like,
Absolutely.
I mean, how incredible is that story? Knocking off the number one team in the country, like that doesn't happen if you don't give them a shot.
Hmm.
Because every single week there are 130 Division One programs that suit up, put their uniform on the same as everybody else. The coach gets up and says, "All right, we're starting our season 0-0. If you're a Power 5 program, hey, we might, if even if we lose one, we could probably still make the playoffs. If you're a Group of 5 program, hey guys, we won't make the playoffs even if we go undefeated. Maybe we'll get a New Year's Six game." You're telling
Right.
me that that coach can honestly stand up there and say, "I want your best effort because we won't make the playoffs." Where's the motivation, right?
Sure.
If you tell a kid you win your conference, you have a chance to play for a national championship.
Hmm.
To me, one, that helps recruiting across the board. That evens recruiting because now you put a school like a Ball State or a Toledo on the same level, potential level. Let's temper those
Sure.
expectations. Potential level as like as an Oregon or as a Utah, and you say,
Yeah.
look, if you win your championship, you can go play for a national championship. So 12 teams, top 4 seeds get buys. I'm fine with that. You invite all 10 conference champions, and then you have 2 at larges. So, oh, you didn't win your conference championship? Show me your out of conference schedule. Why should we include you? This now
Sure.
prevents Clemson from scheduling Wofford or Alabama from
Late in the
scheduling.
season.
Yeah, like exactly. Like your non-conference strength of schedule could prevent you from making it even if you finish 12-1.
Exactly. A couple days, I think it may have been a week ago or so, somebody came up with a 16 team bracket,
Mm-hmm.
and it looked incredible.
See, I'd love 16 teams. I don't know how they would do it. You'd have to
I
you'd
know.
have to cut the season down to 10 games, with 9 conference games and then one non-conference or something.
Right.
But
Because right here, like for example, I had Ohio State at one, playing number 16 Kansas State in Columbus,
yeah, like
and then in that bracket would have been 8 and 9, and the Oklahoma Sooners against the Utah Utes. And the winner of both those games would go to the Orange Bowl,
mm-hmm.
and then same thing with Clemson and Baylor, Wisconsin. Down here, back to the Big Ten, Wisconsin and Penn State. At Happy Valley would have been awesome. Then you have LSU and Notre Dame up here playing in Baton Rouge, and then Florida going out to Eugene, Oregon, and then Georgia playing Auburn in Athens, and then at that time Michigan were to play down in Alabama because they would have been a 3 seed.
like but how cool would that be to see that
Oh, it'd be
happen?
incredible.
Like, I mean, right now as it stands, I think Michigan would play Ohio State, and that we know how that's going to go.
Right.
But I mean, to have that opportunity to say, look, we have all these teams who we truly believe are deserving of the opportunity, because it only takes one time. It only takes a UCF one time to beat the Alabama one time, and then everybody says, yes, we're doing this the right way.
And it's happened before.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Boise State, anybody?
Sure. That was Oklahoma, right? Or no?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
it was
Oklahoma in the
Oklahoma White.
Fiesta Bowl.
J- Jason White was the quarterback, wasn't he?
Yep.
And then Jared Zabransky.
Wow.
He
That's
was so popular, he made it to the NCAA cover of the
Yes, he
game.
did. Yes, he did. That was the 2008 game.
Yep.
I still
And then
have that
that
one.
the running back, I can't think of what his name was. He proposed to his or then girlfriend at the time,
Mm-hmm.
right after the game. I can't remember what his name was though.
Yeah, he. Yeah, I don't remember the name either. That's
Yeah.
gonna elude me for a while. But all
Sure.
right. So let's. I guess let's wrap this up. Go ahead
Let's do
and
it.
let's talk about really quick. Uh, Upsets. Who do you see getting upset this week?
And looking at the schedule, I don't know if there's any major upsets.
Okay.
Any major upsets that will kind of shake up college football here. I think IU Penn State has the potential to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and obviously Wisconsin goes to Nebraska,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously Nebraska's sitting there at 4-5, and they have Wisconsin at 15 points.
Mm-hmm.
But you never that's a rival. I wouldn't say a rivalry game, but not being states aren't that far apart, and that has the potential to be impactful in a weird kind of way.
Yeah, for sure.
And then obviously Sparty goes to Ann Arbor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see Michigan State pulling that one out
Yeah.
with the way they've been playing lately. Um, but then you look at like obviously Clemson, they play host to Wake Forest, who's sitting there at 7-2, and I believe Wake Forest was a touchdown, maybe a field goal away from beating them last year.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't see Texas Iowa State. That could be probably if there's gonna be an upset, it's probably gonna be that.
The
Texas sitting there at 6-3, and Iowa State sitting there at 5-4.
That game is going to be one I definitely keep an eye on. For me, the big game that I have circled on my calendar, Georgia at Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if Auburn can pull this win out, that eliminates one more SEC team from the college football playoffs because I can guarantee they will not put in a 2-loss team.
No.
2 losses tells me you are not the best team in the country.
No.
So if Auburn wins that would shake up everything. That would open the door for your Oregons and your Utahs, and then even your Baylor Oklahoma winner. That opens that up.
Well, heck, that could open the door for Minnesota as well.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. God, Minnesota's such a cool story. If they can win out, they will be the 8th team to play in the Big Ten championship game,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is really, really cool. But teams that haven't, Illinois, Indiana, Purdue, Rutgers, Maryland, and Michigan.
Yeah.
Like the fact that Michigan hasn't played for a Big Ten championship is kind of mind blowing. But
Right. And you think if Northwestern got there last year, it was really because the West was so weak.
yeah, I mean, Northwestern was 7-4 last year and played in the Big Ten championship.
And they're sitting at 1-6, 1-7 right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so awful. But so Auburn, that is the game that I see being an upset. I see Auburn upsetting Georgia. Georgia knows that, hey, we're back in the playoffs, so they're going to be trying to protect that a little bit. But I think Auburn's going to come out. I really like Bo Nix. I mean, he's a great quarterback. Well, not great. I don't want to say great. He's average in the country,
Mm-hmm.
but he's got 1,800 yards. The kid, he's smart with the ball. That's for me what I really like about him. A lot of those interceptions he has 6 picks. I think 4 of them are tip passes. So I don't really blame him a lot. He threw 3 of them alone in his loss to Florida, and then he took number 2 LSU to a 23-20 loss. So
Mm-hmm.
I really like Auburn in this game, especially at home. Sure, they're sitting 3rd in the SEC West. So they're not going to win the SEC, but I really like Auburn in this game. I think that, things are finally clicking. They're at home. Their 2 losses were on the road at Florida and at LSU. You get number 4 Georgia at home, and then you finish with looks like Alabama. Yeah, you get your bye week against Samford, and then you have Alabama at home. So I really like Auburn this week.
That will be definitely an interesting one to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, Bo Nix being a freshman and doing what he's done. Did you see the story on him? I think had to have been against Florida maybe earlier this year.
Okay.
He sat in the front row of the national championship when Cam Newton won it.
Oh, wow.
As an Auburn fan, and Cam Newton gave him like a ball or some gloves or something like that, and it's on camera. And all these years later, he's their starting quarterback.
Oh my gosh, that's a cool story. And see,
Mm-hmm.
You don't get that like in the NFL. Like you get your like, oh hey, my dad played in the NFL, whatever. But you don't get the cool stories like that in the NFL the way you do college football, and that's why I love it. So, but yeah, so that's I think that'll do it for us tonight. Like I said, thank you guys for listening. My name's Alex. My co-host here, AJ.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week.